Okay, so in today's video, I'm gonna be telling you how we launched our company rebrand in only 3 weeks with no code. And the best part is that we did it with only 1.5 people. And here's the process that we went through. What's up everyone, Christian Peverelli here. I'm the founder of WeAreNoCode, and this is my startup studio where we give you tips and tricks on how to build your startup as a non-technical entrepreneur. So like and subscribe now to avoid lots of costly mistakes. Okay, so now let's cut to the chase. A month ago, I was in a sprint with one of my partners called Caio Calderari, also the Chief No-Code Officer at WeAreNoCode, and we were starting to plan out the launch of a new online academy for entrepreneurs. The only problem was that if we wanted to avoid doing double work on the design front, we would have to launch the new brand before we actually launched the platform. And that gave us 4 weeks to get the entire job done. So as you can imagine, our back was against the wall. And after going through this hectic process, I wanted to break it down into steps for you. Now, the first step to rebranding is to get inspired. So essentially, what do you want to do? You want to create a mood board. You want to start thinking about the things that you're trying to communicate with your brand. And then we're going to find ways to be able to create that actual brand once we are inspired from different examples. Now, that can come from designers, that could come from competitors. This inspiration can come from lots of different places, but you want to centralize it on a board, and usually we'll use a tool like Miro to be able to show all of those things on one board visually. Now in our case, Caio is a designer by trade, and so after creating the mood board, he started experimenting in Figma with different designs, colors, with different layouts, different fonts, basically just using it as a playground. The next step is to create specific brand guidelines. So this is the process of making decisions. You want to choose what color palette you're using, what font you're going to be using. You have to talk about a logo or logo concept, photography, illustrations, icons. What would these things look like? So to create the guidelines of your brand, which you're then going to be able to use to create all these amazing assets later. Step 3 of the process is to determine the scope of your rebrand. Now in our case, we chose to completely redo our website, to redo our logo. We chose to also redress all of our social media accounts, to create a designed template newsletter that we'd be able to use for all our future emails, to create transitions and video elements for all of our YouTube work, to redesign the blog, and to create additional digital assets for promotion like flyers, like banners, and all sorts of other things. And the reason why you want to define your scope at first is because each one of these things is going to require specific assets. So the images you're going to need for your profile on LinkedIn have different dimensions than the ones on Facebook that are very different from the ones that you're going to have for YouTube. Your website's also going to have its own assets created specifically for it. And so we need to get some visibility on what are all the elements that we have to create to rebrand these different places. So by the end of it, you know exactly the assets you need to create. Now, once you have a list, we're going to jump into number 4, which is to actually create the assets themselves. So step 1 here is to determine who's going to create these assets. In our case, it was Caio, our designer, and he's also our Chief No-Code Officer. But we also had to determine who are other individuals that we're going to need to be able to bring these to life. We needed our video editor to have all the material that we created. We needed to have an animator of our logo come in. And so we wanted to hire those people early on because oftentimes, since we're dependent on outsource work, we want to make sure that it all aligns and that we're taking care of those things first so we don't find ourselves in a situation where we have to rethink the whole thing because this person couldn't deliver. So we want to tackle that as early as possible. Now, in parallel to that, and this is step 5, it's building the website. First of all, you want to structure out the different pages that you have on your website. Then what we did is that we leveraged a no-code tool called Webflow, and we built our entire website leveraging Webflow. And then we used another tool called Softer to create our free course. And of course, once you have the structure, you can go ahead and put in the elements that you created once you created those assets. And in parallel, we're also going to want to copyright for the website. And of course, once you have both the assets and the copywriting, you can put those together and you can start fine-tuning, because oftentimes it's not the same person who created these assets. And then once you check out the overall flow of information, you might want to change the way you communicate in general. Now, of course, creating the new brand is a huge amount of work, but preparing the launch is actually also important. So that is step 6 of the process. And so what we did for the launch was that we defined what specifically we were going to be communicating on what days. We created a calendar of the release of that content and promotional material. And as I'm recording this, each morning we are actually releasing the promotional materials around the brand. So what we chose to do was to do a 1-week social media campaign through all the different platforms that we use. We chose to create 2 newsletters for our entire newsletter list. We created an animated logo, and we also shot this video, which is a kind of making of, explaining you a little bit the process behind how we rebranded. And by the way, if you're liking this video, please like, subscribe, and comment so that we can continue to do this work. And if you're already subscribed to the channel, I like your style. Back to business. Number 7 is all around launching itself. So this really is kind of a delicate dance where we're trying to coordinate all the elements of the release and making sure that nothing is left behind. So in this process, pretty much a couple hours before you want to launch, you need to switch over the domain usually, which means that your website, so for us, WeAreNoCode.com would appear with the new website. You need to use these elements to redress all of your social networks within a 30 to 45 minute time range. And you need to announce the launch before everyone else finds out, before you actually launched it. And the key here was organization. So Kaio created a board on Miro. You could of course create this board on any type of visual tool, but essentially it's to make sure that everyone is perfectly in line with all the tasks that have to take place on every single day of the launch, and also to make sure that we have all the assets in the right folders with the right copywriting prepared for the posting of those. Now, in some cases, you can use things like Hootsuite to plan out your actual posting. In other cases, you're gonna have to do it manually because certain formats don't post automatically on these social networks. So for us, for example, we were heavily focused on releasing on YouTube and on LinkedIn, and then the other social networks were a good to have for us. So just knowing that, we made sure to prioritize those first. But again, having a proper organization and knowing who's responsible for what down to the absolute detail and when those things take place is really important when it comes to the launch and to the promotion leading up to the launch and maybe a little bit after as well. Now, the 8th and final step of the process is actually to start getting feedback. People might love it, people might hate it, you'll get specific feedback. And my main piece of advice here is to hold on to that feedback so you can grab snapshots if you're seeing comments on social networks. You can, grab little links or quotes that you're receiving via email and just start gathering them in one place. This is not yet the time for you to actually take action with that. You just want to put them together, specifically when you're just launching, because you probably have a lot of other things going on as well. So make sure to gather all of those. And you're gonna want to actually look at those and make specific decisions probably a couple of days after you've launched, unless they're direct emergencies. So of course, if you haven't changed the logo in a specific place, you wanna go and you wanna adapt that logo. Or if you have some kind of an error here or there, you wanna make sure you attend those, but make sure you're only focusing on the urgent things. And I would just wait a little bit for things to calm down before you start improving things. And if I had to break it down into 3 specific segments, I would say that the first couple of days were actually around planning. Then the next 10 to 15 days were all in production. And then the additional week was in releasing. And that, my friends, is how you launch a rebrand in 3 weeks with no code. I hope you enjoyed this. Shout out to Kyle for the amazing designs. And if you're looking to launch your next startup business, but you're not technical, check out our free course. And we'll see you all in the next video. Let's go.